All right,
Yeah.
Clayton, we got Washington coming in here. And as we alluded to, can't take the Huskies lightly despite a very curious score in Montana. Against Montana, they lose 13-7. I just watched a couple highlights. Obviously couldn't move the ball either on the ground or in the air. And something that you wouldn't expect is that the top 25 Washington Huskies will not be in the top 25. Maybe Michigan squeezes their way into the top 25 for this Washington game. Regardless, that doesn't matter. But I got to expect Washington's going to bounce back and show up on Saturday night.
Yeah, I would think so too. I think one of two things can happen after a game like that. If you're Washington, you can bounce back with a vengeance and come in and try to surprise Michigan. A Michigan team that, again, I don't think is letting its guard down because they know what it's like last season winning that opener and then having a letdown. So I think that they are, Aiden Hutchinson said it after the game, we haven't done a damn thing yet. And he's right. I mean, they were supposed to beat Western Michigan pretty handily, if you're Michigan and if you're a good team. So you haven't done anything yet. This is still a Washington team that has a lot of talent. They were without a few wide receivers in that game. I haven't watched the whole thing either yet. I'm planning to tonight. I have it on my DVR. So I'm excited to see what went wrong for them, and was it just kind of a one-game type of thing, or are they weak at some of these positions? Maybe they thought they weren't coming in. That'll be interesting. Dylan Morris, from what I saw, their quarterback, did not play very well. His wide receivers had quite a few drops, including Giles Jackson, former Michigan wide receiver, dropping a fourth down play late in the game there. But it shouldn't have been that close to begin with. So I'm excited to watch that film. But overall, I think that going back to what I was saying earlier, you have one of two ways Washington can approach this game. They can come back with a vengeance, or they can kind of just be a broken and torn and tattered team coming into the Big House, traveling across the country, being upset after that first game. So I think we'll be able to know right away in this game what kind of mindset Washington has, and also Michigan bringing that energy. The Wolverines are 7-2 in night games at the Big House since they began playing them in 2011. Remember, the lights weren't installed until very recent here, just a decade ago. So I think it's going to be a good crowd. I think Michigan will be ready to play. I think Washington, though, if I had to guess, will be much more ready to play than they were a week ago. And they might have been, preparing for Michigan at times throughout training camp. Jim Harbaugh said they were preparing for Washington a little bit, and they might have been overlooking Montana. So if their players were overlooking Montana, if you're a Washington fan, you're probably hoping that it was at least for the bigger goal of beating Michigan, I guess. But I expect a pretty close game. That line moved from 1 to 5.5 now is where Michigan opened. So I think that feels about right. Michigan with a slight edge here, but it could go either way.
Yeah, I just saw a couple of highlights from the Washington-Montana game and how Montana closed out the game. But, it's obvious from the stat sheet that you would expect a high-level Power 5 to push around an FCS in the trenches, and they couldn't. They couldn't run the ball, 2.5 yards per carry. Then even when they went to the air, they completed a decent amount, not a great amount, but 27 of 46 is whatever, 55 to 60%. And 3 picks, and they only had 226 yards off all those completions. So their receivers were not getting loose for big plays at all. And you mentioned your old buddy Giles Jackson. He caught 4 balls, but the big drop you mentioned, and the 4 balls only for 15 yards. So he couldn't get free either. Montana must be a world beater, or Washington was just looking past them. We will find out a lot.
I was going to say, credit Montana. I mean, good for them.
Absolutely.
But as you kind of mentioned earlier, some of those week 1 games can be deceiving. We've seen it, as I've mentioned a couple times, because I think it's so relevant this week with Michigan on the good side. Winning a game like that. In 2018, they lose to Notre Dame and the sky was falling, and then they won 10 straight games. You go back to the Lloyd Carr days when Michigan lost to Appalachian State, then lost to Oregon. But then they turned things around and ended up being the team, at least for a stretch of games there. I know they didn't beat Ohio State at the end of the season, but being the team that people thought, or close to it, that they would be coming into the year. So Washington's season is not over. This is a long season. People are forgetting it's not a 4-game season like it was for the Huskies last year. It's a 12-game season. Plenty of time to turn it around. That could start this weekend. That's why Michigan has to play well to win.
Yeah, there's a ton of examples out there. You mentioned you brought it up. If I was going to bring up 07 Apple,
I know.
I would have had to apologize or something. But Clayton brought it up. So anyway, that Michigan team turned out to finish in the top 10, beat Florida in the Capital One Bowl that year. So they were a good team. And Northwestern a couple of years ago lost to Akron in non-conference play, and they were in Indianapolis for the Big Ten championship game. We could go on and on with examples all over the place of it's not good, but it's been bounced back from in the past many, many times. Clayton, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game on Saturday night. Big one, Washington at Michigan, prime time, ABC, 8 o'clock Eastern time. All eyes on the Big House. Thanks a lot, Clayton.
Yep. Thanks for having me.